In a bid to ease rising global tensions over trade, U.S. and Chinese officials held 2 days talks in Stockholm. The meetings were described as constructive by both sides in raising hopes of a possible extension to the current 90-day tariff truce. Meanwhile, the sixth strongest earthquake ever recorded that rocked Russia's eastern peninsula has triggered tsunami warnings in Russia, Japan, and parts of the U.S., where countries in and around the Pacific Ocean have been placed on varying degrees of alerts for anticipated tsunamis. And I'm Salma El-Fiki. Let's get in focus. As the clock ticks for a U.S.-China trade deal following what both sides described as constructive talks in Stockholm, the Washington Post reports that the Trump administration has softened its approach to Beijing ahead of a potential fall summit between the U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. And according to the Washington Post, the administration's moves include discouraging Taiwan's leader from making planned stopovers in the U.S. next month, postponing a meeting between Taipei's defense minister and top Pentagon officials in June, and pausing new export controls on China. However, the Washington Post warns that Trump's focus on securing a trade deal could compromise U.S. national security and weaken efforts to counter China's growing economic, military, and tech influence, particularly in areas like AI and quantum computing. Meanwhile, the 2-day talks in Stockholm marked a notable step towards stabilizing U.S.-China trade relations, with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying that Trump would need to decide whether to extend the current trade truce between the two countries. And delving more into this, joining us from Washington is Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, the Global Foreign Policy Center Executive Director. And welcome, sir, to In Focus.
Good to see you, Salma.
Thank you. It appears that the latest round of talks in Stockholm was promising, particularly as officials from both sides expressed optimism about a potential breakthrough. What ways were these negotiations, do you think, constructive, as described by the officials?
Oh, wow. Salma, the people I'm talking to are cautiously optimistic, but
I'm not, no.
Yeah, the people I'm talking to are cautiously optimistic. I mean, there wasn't a hammer that was dropped today when they decided to break away from the conversations in Stockholm. But with the Secretary of Commerce leading this delegation, there's concern that I'm hearing coming out of Stockholm here in the United States that the U.S. is giving away too much, that the Trump administration is giving away too much, and that they're in a place of weakness right now in these negotiations. So China's got to be feeling pretty good about where this goes. The one positive I think that we are seeing is that there is constructive dialogue to get President Xi and Donald Trump together, and that's a big deal.
Well, the Stockholm meeting marked the third round of the U.S.-China trade talks in less than 3 months and ahead of the August 12th deadline. Does the increased frequency of meetings reflect, do you think, a strong desire from both sides to avoid further tariff escalation and to keep communication channels open? What do you think?
It depends. If I'm President Xi, I look at this as kind of being in the driver's seat on this. I think the pressure's on Donald Trump. Because of the intertwined economies that we have, because of the U.S. reliance on cheap products coming from Asia and in particular China, the Trump administration can't afford to see price increases. They can't afford politically to see inflation on manufactured goods. That being the case, this is a very sensitive time. I think they're wanting to show progress. I think the more that they talk, the more likely it is we'll see a continuation of a tariff truce that's been going on before August 15th. But make no mistake about it is the people that are sweating right now are the Americans, not the Chinese.
Um, a Chinese trade negotiator told reporters that both parties had agreed to maintain the truce, and adding that discussions in the Swedish capital were candid and aimed at sustaining close communication. But in your opinion, would a breakthrough in the pending deal represent maybe a win-win situation for both countries, considering their expressed willingness to continue negotiations, do you think?
Yes, I mean, look, I've stated on this network, and I think you and I, Selma, have talked about it before,
Yeah.
is, the concept that our center has put out about mutually assured economic destruction.
Mm-hmm.
We are so reliant, each economy is so reliant on each other,
On the other.
that a deal has to come through in order to stave off a global economic reaction.
Okay.
The second you get the two biggest economies going after each other, that becomes a problem, and that creates an economic pressure on all economies.
Yeah.
That being the case, I think the fact that they're still talking is positive. The fact that they are still putting out public statements that shows slightly optimistic progress is a good thing. I think what is going to happen here is the U.S. is going to have to realize that the recent trade deals between the UK and China, for let's say, the UK and India rather. You look at the EU and China dialogues that happened with the EU president in Beijing last week. The BRICS alliance is a distinctive economic threat. The U.S. has got to realize it, and they're going to have to be very practical in the one-on-one bilateral negotiations with Beijing. That is something I think everybody's keeping an eye on, is the increased influence of the BRICS alliance versus the U.S. economic dominance.
Okay. Well, according to the Washington Post, the Trump administration has softened its stance towards Beijing. I don't know, based on recent talks. What specific actions do you think has the U.S. taken that suggest a more conciliatory approach?
Well, one of the big roadblock points in this dialogue was the sale of the NVIDIA chips to Chinese computer manufacturers such as Lenovo. Apparently, the Trump administration, according to reports I've seen, has kind of released a little bit of the restrictions on that, allowing Chinese computer manufacturers to, buy these chips and put them into their manufactured product and ship them out globally. That's a big concession for the U.S., I think. If the U.S. is trying to make itself the manufacturer of tech products again, and telling all the manufacturers to leave China and return back to the U.S., don't offshore it, all you're doing by giving them access to the NVIDIA chips to put in their products in the Chinese manufacturing plants is allowing China to continue to build cheap electronics that they can distribute worldwide, and the U.S. and the global economy relies on cheap electronics from the Far East. That's a big concession, and I think it's. I don't know if it's a softening. I don't know if it's a calculated.
I was just going to tell you, is this like a softening position, do you think, in your opinion?
You know what, Selma? I'm still trying to read it out. The news that we're getting on the chips and the news that we're getting out of Stockholm is happening pretty rapid fire today. Okay. My initial take, my initial observation is that this is something that is showing that the Trump administration may have leaned over its ski tips. They may have overestimated the power that they have over China and the influence that they would have on China. I think they overestimated the strength of their economic dominance and their economic strength that they can do globally. And I think what's happened in the past 2 weeks has demonstrated it. I think this is a nervous reaction. I don't think it was that calculated. But make no mistake about it, it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. Because again, the Trump administration right now is looking. They just had numbers released not that long ago that said the U.S. Economy grew 3% last month, which is a very strong number
Yep.
for Trump and the U.S. economy. They're going to brag on that. But if you get into a trade war and you start getting into tariffs, you just saw that Modi got hit with 25% tariffs by Trump today. Uh, there's some serious dealings that are happening right now that could be that could have an effect on the global economy.
The Washington Post also notes that Trump's focus on achieving a trade deal maybe could compromise U.S. national security and undermine efforts to counter China's expanding economic, military, and technological influence. What's your take on that, Mr. Russell?
Well, that's a very good question, and the thing about it is you've got to separate a little bit. I mean, yes, they're interconnected. When you talk about the economic and the national security interests, and even the relationship that we have with our alliance partners, it becomes very nuanced. What we're seeing on the economic side is the idea that if we're giving them these chips, if we're allowing them to use these chips into computers, particularly into larger scale mega computers, if you will, what we're dealing is allowing them to kind of drive their influence into the world of AI. Does that become a national security issue? Of course it does.
Maybe. Yep.
Yeah, of course, it's definitely a threat. But for example, do we want to sacrifice a strong economic win for the Trump administration and maybe put some pressure on, like, let's say, Taiwan? You were mentioning the Washington Post report that said that the Taiwanese leader, President Lai, couldn't make a stopover in New York. That the Trump administration wouldn't approve that. That's a big concession to Beijing. So does that create a showing of a weakness in the Asian Pacific Rim? Possibly. I think Xi's pressing the envelope to see how much he can push Trump and where that breaking point is. Are we at a breaking point for Trump yet? No, but I think we're getting close.
Well, that brings me to my following question, where Trump has suggested he may meet with Xi Jinping before the end of the year. How might such a summit offer a political boost to ongoing negotiations and pave the way maybe for a more comprehensive agreement, you think?
Yes. That's actually a very complicated question, Selma. The two leaders have to meet. The two leaders have to have a bilateral sit-down talk, just even for the political theater. It shows that there is a lessening of tensions if the two of them are in the same room having a talk and talking one-on-one, leader to leader. The optimism in that, and the optimism in that isn't so much on the national defense side, where China's beating us isn't on ships and troops and missiles and tanks. Where China's beating us is in our pocketbooks. They're beating us economically. The Belt and Road Initiative has pretty much given them a dominant presence in South America, Africa, areas that we used to have a good, strong economic presence that we're now probably in second place to China in those markets. By doing that, China is exuding a soft power that the U.S. used to do, but they seem to be beating us at that. And until we get some sort of resolution that, unless the Defense Department, Pete Hegseth and the Trump administration start realizing that the existential threat from China isn't a fighting war, it's an economic war. They're going to have to change the focus. But that being said, anytime you can get Xi and Trump in the same room together is going to relieve the tensions on a strategic front from a possible shooting war, but most importantly, it's fixing the war of the economies. The economic war is the much more dangerous threat to the global the global security.
And that was Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, the Global Foreign Policy Center Executive Director. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable insights and joining us today at In Focus. And now let's delve into the powerful 8.8 magnitude earthquake that struck Russia's eastern peninsula, sparking tsunami warnings from Japan to the United States. A powerful 8.8 magnitude earthquake struck Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, triggering widespread tsunami warnings across Russia, Japan, and parts of the United States. And according to the Time magazine, the quake that struck Russia's eastern peninsula considers the sixth most powerful earthquake ever recorded in the world and injured several people. In response, multiple countries, including Japan and the US, issued tsunami alerts and placed coastal regions on watch. The Japan Meteorological Agency urged immediate evacuation from coastal areas, while tsunami waves reached the US West Coast, impacting parts of California and Washington. The National Weather Service warned the waves could intensify overnight. Tsunami sirens also sounded across all Hawaiian islands as precautionary measures were enacted. And for more analysis, we are joined from Paris with Chadin Diab, the international expert in environmental sciences. And welcome, and thanks for joining me here at In Focus. And as the sixth strongest earthquake in history and its ability to trigger worldwide tsunamis, why does this make it uniquely dangerous, do you think? And what does this imply about its potential long-term impacts?
I think this is, as we see, this is a very high magnitude earthquake, and is so strong, and we can cause a significant, impact in the future, which generate a large tsunami, which could be affect the coastline away. If we can look about this impact, which could include the permanent geological change, the problem related to the ecosystem, infrastructure damage, and also after shock, which we used by the system and earthquake, it caused like a damage for months or years on the ecosystem, in the ocean, and in the deep sea.
And what do you think are the long-term environmental impacts of such a major earthquake like the one that just struck Kamchatka, particularly on the marine and coastal ecosystems?
We can see that it's a very sensitive ecosystem related to the coral reef and mangrove and also the sea state. So it could be caused a bit like sediment displacement, which could be exposed on the seabed. We can affect also the water quality degradation because it will be affect also the salt water and fusion on the fresh water and the ecosystem on the soil, change on the coastal geography, which could be affect the habitat and the migration routes. So it will be having a big damage for months or maybe years on the long-term environmental impact.
Ms. Diab, why do you think the 8.8 magnitude earthquake in the Kamchatka triggered tsunami warnings across the Pacific?
We think that the waves have this capacity to travel thousands and thousands of kilometers, and we can this the tsunami propagate across the ocean. Could also have like vulnerable Pacific countries to allow evacuation. So I think that today we can this zone have like a vertical for displacement, and because like an impact across the Pacific could be very dangerous for a long term.
And how do the tsunami waves differ from regular ocean waves in terms of maybe speed, wavelength, and energy?
I think it is about the magnitude and the fast about this tsunami travel, because it's traveling very fast. If you look about it to the speed, about 500 to 800 kilometers by hour compared to regular waves, which is about 10 to 30 kilometers by hour. So this is wave length, which be very extreme, and be comparing to the versus residual wave, which would be have meter to 10 meters. So tsunami carry more energy, and it could be spread this energy on long waves on the heights as also in the deeper water.
And what do you think, if you can just share with us, what are maybe the factors that determine how far inland a tsunami can travel?
I think that it could be, this could be affecting by another with, like the presence of natural or artificial barrier reefs or mangrove or sea wells could be help also to determine this speed and the influence of the tsunami travel. So land elevation also, wave duration and the frequency. So also which was the initial wave height and energy upon reaching the shore. So all these parameters could affect and could determine how this tsunami can travel, because it's like a massive energy of the displacement of this tsunami. So it could be depend on the dynamic of their travel and the energy that they can spread.
Ms. Diab, let me ask you, can climate change directly or influence the frequency or intensity of earthquakes and tsunamis? Because now there's been a severe heat wave all across Europe and even in Egypt, and people are worried that tsunamis might be happening because of that change of weather that has never happened to us before. How can that affect tsunamis, do you think? Do they actually cause them, that climate change, and in what sense? How?
Yeah, we should be very clear about something that for the moment there is no direct causal link between earthquake and also what's happening with the climate change. But that means what happened for the tsunami, which could be the consequence of this earthquake, and this is the displacement of geotechnical layers. Could just that mean the climate change could amplify the impact of the tsunami by rising of the seawater and also the level of the sea, and also could be that mean the natural coastal defense which be more weak. But the climate change could be like that mean a parameter who could amplify the impact of the tsunami, but it's not really the real impact or the real cause of this tsunami or earthquake. For the moment, there is no scientific factors which could be prove that, but it could amplify the consequence of this tsunami on the reef and the coastal system.
So do you think changes in the ocean temperature or currents, they alter tsunami propagation patterns?
We can see that mean that the temperature variation of the ocean could not really generate tsunami, but as I say, that mean today it could be impact, that means to amplify the consequence of the tsunami, and could also make the ecosystem more weak. That means the ecosystem of the reefs and the coastal defense by the erosions, by all that, but there is no relation direct between tsunami and earthquake and the climate change for the moment as scientific factors or scientific proof.
Okay. Do you think there are certain regions that are becoming more vulnerable to tsunamis due to the climate-related factors? I don't know, like subsidence or stronger storms, maybe?
But I think that tsunami propagation could be governed by, that means, the sea floors or wave physics. So if we have like that means the sea level rise enables tsunami waves to generate to the future island, but in the same time that means it could be this more urban development, the erosion also of the sea coast could also unfortunately help to have like a tsunami propagation. maybe in this side. So we need like an increase more information and system alarm about these issues related to the sea level rise, which could enable tsunami waves to generate to the future island and have a big impact.
Ms. Diab, waves also hit Japan, where nearly 2 million people were asked to evacuate, and Russia's Kuril Islands in the Pacific. Can this affect the upcoming daily lives and the economic conditions in Japan?
I think that is important to see that Japan and also they are all the time exposed to this type of problem related to the earthquake and all of that, to the tsunami we know from the history. But I think that this time it was more strong, and I think it will be an issue for the displacement of the population, which would be very huge and vast. So I think that we should think about the economical, impact on the future about what happened. But for the moment, I think that to protect the population and to find an issue about their displacement, it will be something that we should look about it in the few days.
And in what ways do you think large undersea earthquakes amplify the risk of transoceanic disasters?
I think it is if we can, this is a phenomenon with a geological phenomenon, which is very related. If you look about what happened all the time in earthquake and seismic movement on the technical, on the geo layers, it impacts also what we have this after the consequence to have like a tsunami, and we have like a movement related to the eruption of volcans. So this is phenomena that are related in the geological phenomenon. But for the moment, it's not all the time they are related in the same time. But we are observe this intensity so high in the same time related to the volcanic aspects and also the earthquake and also this impact of the tsunami impact.
And what do you think might be the long-term geopolitical, economic, or environmental consequences of a quake and a tsunami of this scale?
I think that just be very careful about this, this impact because it's like we see that what happened in Fukushima last time with the tsunami and some earthquake consequence. But in this time, to have like in the three continents in the same time, it's to be, I think, is a huge impact. I don't know if we can see that we begin to have like this type of displacement of population and to visualize also the infrastructure related to that and how the population will, move to another towns, in the island. Yeah. I think that's just to be observed and to be like careful about this consequence in the near future.
Do you think, in your opinion, if you can give us any tips or any things that you recommend governments should be preparing in case of such natural disasters, which are becoming, I think, more and more common with climate change? How can governments maybe prepare for such
I think that,
disasters?
I think that today with it's very important. We see in Japan that they are, preparing for this type of, tsunami or earthquake. But on the time it was, more powerful than they are waiting for. I think that the time is really important to prepare like this center of observation of natural risk disaster, prepare the population about it, to have like an indication what we can do when we have this phenomenon of disaster or natural disaster, like flooding or like an earthquake or tsunami, and also to alert the population before to have the time, if this happens. So I think that the center of meteorological and also Natural Disaster Center will be important with this type of observation, modeling, to prepare and see what happens for the future, but also to alert the media. And also, I think it's very important thing for this type of training on this disaster.
Yep. Well, that was Ms. Chadden Diab, the international expert in environmental sciences. Thank you so much for joining us today at In Focus. And with that, we wrap up today's episode of In Focus. And thanks for watching. And until next time, stay informed and stay focused.